that it carries forward through the transition.
The nation.
Just a wee bit. Tireless look. Oh.
Not everyone gets a tie from Jeffrey.
Great 2024.
Given how I get 3/4 here. Very high to
Nice work, gents.
Casual.
Pick a side day. Pick a side day.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, okay. I'm excited to see you all too. Okay, so today President Biden met with President-elect Trump for approximately 2 hours in the Oval Office. White House Chief of Staff Jeff Zients and incoming Chief of Staff Susie Wiles joined the meeting. It was a substantive meeting, an exchange of views. They discussed important national security and domestic policy issues facing the nation and the world. President Biden also raised important items on Congress's to-do list for the lame duck session, including funding the government and providing the disaster supplemental funding the president requested. Finally, the president reiterated what he said to the president-elect the day after the election and to the American people in a Rose Garden just last week. We will have an orderly transition and a peaceful transition of power. With that, as you can see, I have the National Security Advisor with me, Jake Sullivan, who is going to preview APEC in Peru and also G20 in Brazil. The president is going to be leaving tomorrow, as you all know. And Jake, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Corinne, and hi, everybody. I'm going to make some brief comments about the president's trip that he leaves on tomorrow, answer a few questions because I know the issue you are most interested in is hearing from Corinne about the meeting. So I will not dally too long up here, but I think it is important to lay out the president's trip here over the next several days. Tomorrow he travels to South America. His first stop will be Peru for the APEC summit, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. And then he'll go on to Brazil for the first ever presidential trip to the Amazon, and then to the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. At APEC, the president will reinforce America's leading role in the Indo-Pacific. And over the last 4 years, he has markedly enhanced our strategic position in this vital region, from our treaty alliances to AUKUS to the Quad to the historic trilateral with Japan and Korea. And with respect to that trilateral, he will meet with President Yoon of South Korea and Prime Minister Ishiba of Japan to celebrate the historic cooperation between our three nations and discuss the importance of institutionalizing the progress we've made so that it carries forward through the transition. While in Lima, President Biden will also meet with President Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China. This will be the third in-person meeting between the two leaders since President Biden came into office, and their final meeting as presidents. They previously met, as you know, in Bali in 2022 at the G20 summit, and at Woodside, California, near San Francisco in 2023 on the margins of the APEC summit, which was exactly 1 year and 1 day ago. And throughout his time in office, President Biden and his team have worked to effectively and responsibly manage the competition between the United States and the PRC. The President's approach on the PRC has prioritized investments in sources of American strength at home, including growing the middle class and ensuring that America maintains its industrial capacity and its innovation edge in fields such as semiconductors and artificial intelligence. He has strengthened our alliances around the world, and especially in the Indo-Pacific. He has boosted American deterrence, and he's ensured that America remains the partner of choice for countries both in the region and across the world. The President has also taken common sense measures to advance our national security and protect our most sensitive technologies, to prevent them from being exploited or used against us by the PRC, including through significant new export control measures. At the same time, the President has demonstrated that the U.S. and the PRC can manage our differences and prevent competition from veering into conflict or confrontation. And he's done that by ensuring the maintenance of open lines of communication at the leader level, at the military-to-military level, and at every level of our respective governments. And we've also worked to advance cooperation where our interests align, including on counter-narcotics and climate change, which is what the people of our two countries expect and what the world expects. And this meeting between President Biden and President Xi will be an opportunity to ensure a smooth transition and also to continue to keep those channels of communication open, including those especially critical military-to-military channels of communication. Of course, in Lima, President Biden will also meet President Boluarte of Peru to mark the strength and durability of our bilateral relationship with Peru. After that, the President will travel to Brazil, and he'll start with a historic stop in the Amazon to underscore his personal commitment and America's continuing commitment at all levels of government and across our private sector and civil society to combat climate change at home and abroad. And this has been obviously one of the defining causes of President Biden's presidency. While in Manaus, in the Amazon, President Biden will visit the rainforest, engage with local leaders who are working to preserve and protect this critical ecosystem. And as I noted, this will be the first ever visit of a sitting U.S. president to the Amazon. President Biden will then travel to Rio de Janeiro to participate in his fourth and final G20 Leaders Summit. High on the agenda there will be issues associated with debt sustainability for low and middle income countries, mobilizing finance for infrastructure, physical, digital, energy infrastructure around the world, and also dealing, obviously, with the major geopolitical issues of the day, from Ukraine to the Middle East. As you all know, the G20 is a unique forum. It includes both our closest allies and partners, as well as our adversaries. And pulling this group together around shared challenges is never easy, but we do expect to make some progress, particularly around debt and finance during our time in Rio. The President, of course, will also meet with President Lula of Brazil. The two leaders have really built a strong, productive relationship over the last 4 years, and they're looking forward to have their final meeting together as presidents as well. So we've got a busy week ahead of us, and with that, as I said, I'll take a few questions and then turn it back over to Corinne. Yeah.
Thanks again for doing this, Jay. In the run-up to the election, President Biden warned that allies were worried about America's commitment to the world. What's his message to those allies after this election?
Well, he's going to have the same message that he's had for 4 years as president, which is that he believes that America's allies are vital to America's national security. They make us stronger. They multiply our capability. They take a burden off of our shoulders. They contribute to our common causes, including the cause of standing up for freedom and territorial integrity in Ukraine. And as I noted in my opening comments, when he goes to this Asia-Pacific summit in Peru, he'll go with our alliances in the Indo-Pacific at a literal all-time high. Japan, Korea, Australia, the Philippines, a really remarkable record over 4 years, and that's what he's going to hand off to President Trump. And he is going to be making the case to our allies and, frankly, to our adversaries that America's standing with its alliances, investing in its alliances, and then asking its allies to step up and do their part, which they have done these past 4 years, is central to American strength and capacity in the world. That will be his message. It's a message of principle. It's a message of practicality, and it's been one of the causes of President Biden's life. Yeah.
Korean national security obviously came up in the meeting today. You've suggested that the president would make the case to the president-elect not to walk away from Ukraine. Was that message conveyed? How was it received?
Well, I'll let Corinne speak to what happened in the meeting. I will only note that President Biden reinforced his view that the United States standing with Ukraine on an ongoing basis is in our national security interest. And it's in our national security interest because a strong Europe, a stable Europe, standing up to aggressors and dictators and pushing back against their aggression is vital to ensuring that we don't end up getting dragged directly into a war, which has happened obviously twice in the 20th century on the European continent. So the president has made this case. He'll continue to make this case both privately and publicly. And he will make the case that our investment in Ukraine, the funds that the Congress has appropriated, these aren't just dollars that we're picking up and shipping over to another country. They're dollars we're investing here in the United States in American jobs, producing American weapons that we send to Ukraine and American weapons that we are building to expand our own industrial base and our own military capacity to deter other adversaries all around the world. So he laid this out. He will continue to make this case as we go forward. And as we go through this transition, it will be our responsibility as the national security team to lay out for the incoming team both what we see and, in terms of the current situation, and how we believe that the United States of America, through this transition and beyond, can put Ukraine in the strongest possible position on the battlefield so that it's in the strongest possible position at the negotiating table for an ultimate deal. Yeah.
The families of the American hostages who are held in Gaza are going to meet with President Biden today. We've heard from the families that they would like to see the Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration work together to try to secure the release of these hostages. Do you see any room for cooperation or coordination between your team, the president's team, and Trump's team to try to get a deal before Biden leaves office?
I met with the hostages myself yesterday, and as you noted, President Biden will meet with the families of the hostages yesterday, and President Biden will meet with them very shortly. And they asked me this question, and I was very simple and emphatic with them. Yes, of course we're prepared to work with the incoming team in common cause on a bipartisan basis to do everything in our collective American power to secure the release of the hostages, both living and deceased. So we are open to have that engagement, have that collaboration, and we will continue to work in every remaining day that President Biden has in office, that we have in these jobs, to try to bring those hostages home to their loved ones.
Just to clarify real quick though, there's been no discussion yet with the Trump team about doing that?
Well, I will say that this is a topic, obviously, the American hostages being held in Gaza that President Biden and President Trump covered today, but we have not had the opportunity to engage with the incoming team yet. I'm only expressing, standing here today, as I did to the hostage families yesterday, we are very much willing to do so, and we've sent a signal to the incoming team that we're prepared to work with them on this issue, as with every other issue, because President Biden's cardinal direction to us is ensure a smooth and orderly transition.
On that, are you finding the Israelis as responsive to Biden administration inquiries or requests, given that we know the Prime Minister is in pretty frequent touch with the President-elect?
I had the opportunity to sit down yesterday with the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer. We had a detailed discussion about every element of the current situation in the Middle East, and it was a constructive discussion. We are still actively working in support of our common efforts to push back against our common adversaries, to try to deal with the situation in Gaza, in Lebanon, and directly with respect to the Islamic Republic of Iran. And just to give you an example, we are working on an ongoing daily basis to try to increase the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza, given the suffering of the innocent civilians there who are trapped amidst the crossfire between the IDF and the terrorist group Hamas. We have made some progress in that regard. We extracted further commitments from the Israeli side over the course of the past couple of days. We want to see those commitments followed through on. So we believe that we can continue to work across the board on all of the relevant issues, whether it's humanitarian assistance or it's ensuring the defense of Israel against Iranian attacks, or it's working on ceasefire efforts and a hostage deal in Gaza, or it's ultimately bringing a diplomatic resolution to Lebanon, which we're actively working on. We'll continue to do that every day that we have remaining in office.
Jake, I know you can't speak to what happened in the meeting earlier. We'll ask Karine about that. But 8 years ago, then President Obama explicitly warned incoming President Donald Trump about the urgent threat posed by North Korea. He said it was the most urgent national security threat the U.S. was facing at the time. What would you communicate to your national security advisor peer who's going to be following you in this job? What is the most urgent national security threat facing the United States today as Donald Trump prepares to take office?
Well, I would say two things in answer to that question. The first is that if you look out at a strategic level, the competition with the People's Republic of China is going to be defining for what the world looks like over the course of the next 10, 20, and 30 years. And so that has got to be a paramount priority for the incoming administration. And the person who's been named as my successor, the person who's been floated as the Secretary of State, these are people who have very much focused on that challenge, and we'll look forward to talking to them about how we've approached it and obviously pass on the current state of play. Then there's the most immediate issue, which is Iran and its proxy groups continue to take actions that directly threaten Americans and American interests in the Middle East, and that has to be dealt with on an urgent basis. Now, that's at the macro level and the micro level. In between those two, you have an ongoing war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine, representing a larger threat to European security and therefore global security, and you've got North Korea coming behind to provide troops in that war. So these are all issues for which we have clear approaches, working in coordination with allies and partners, and we're going to try to ensure that we pass off each of these areas to the next team in a way that is as smooth as possible.
Last time he was, just to follow up quickly, last time in that same meeting, Obama told Trump that he had real concerns about the hiring of a national security advisor, Mike Flynn. Donald Trump ultimately hired Mike Flynn. Do you have any concerns about the names that you have heard mentioned so far and announced so far by Donald Trump to serve in his administration in a national security role?
I know some of them. I've engaged with some of them, and people like, for example, Congressman Waltz, who's been named to be my replacement. He's somebody that I have engaged with in the past. I respect his service to this country in uniform. He's put his life on the line. I respect his service in Congress. He and I obviously don't see eye to eye on every issue, but I am very much looking forward to engaging him over these next 60 days, as I said, so that we can have this smooth handoff. There are other people that he's named who I just don't know, I haven't met, and therefore can't comment on. Yeah.
So you talk about wanting to engage, wanting to smooth this transition. Why hasn't it happened yet? Is the signing of the MOUs an actual issue that is preventing you from coordinating with the incoming Trump team?
So I'll defer to Karine to kind of go into the nitty-gritty. What I'll say at a broad level, though, is the MOU creates the opening for the landing teams to arrive at the agencies, to include the NSC. But that doesn't mean that we can't reach out and get, and express our willingness to engage with our counterparts, our incoming counterparts. We've done that, and so I expect that in a matter of days here, we should be able to have some engagement. Of course, that depends on whether the incoming team wants to engage, and that will be up to them. But for our part, we are more than willing to do what is our responsibility as directed by the president and, frankly, as dictated by the Constitution, which is to ensure the peaceful transition of power.
I have a China-related question as well. The Biden administration largely left in place the Trump-era tariffs on China. The policy towards China hasn't been wildly divergent. Do you see the potential for bipartisan agreement on the relationship with China in the next administration or going forward?
I think for us to succeed in the long-term competition with the PRC, it will require a bipartisan foundation. The best traditions of American foreign policy have always had a bipartisan element, and many aspects of the policy that we have pursued in this administration with respect to the PRC and with respect to the Indo-Pacific have been bipartisan. By the way, the same thing is true with respect to Ukraine, where there has been strong bipartisan support and votes in both the House and the Senate for the resources and the strategy for Ukraine. So from our perspective, we would like to see that continue. Now, obviously, we don't know what the incoming team is going to do, how divergent they will be. Those will be decisions they take, not for me to comment on. All I can say is that when it comes to investing in our alliances, the sources of strength at home, the protections of our advanced technologies, these are things we're going to advocate continue because we think that they are not political issues, they're American issues that can serve all of the people of this country. Yeah.
Will the president raise this alleged hack by a Chinese hacking group when he meets with President Xi? And are you planning any kind of consequences for that hack?
It is a significant issue. I expect that the FBI and CISA will have an update in terms of their investigation which is ongoing, into the hack soon. We here at the White House have stood up at the NSC, what's called a UCG, a Unified Coordinating Group, in order to coordinate the entire U.S. government to be able to deal with this hack, which is a hack of private telecommunications providers, but private telecommunications providers that provide services to U.S. government personnel, among others. So you will hear from the FBI and CIS on that. I do expect this will come up in the meeting in Peru. And I'm not going to speak to consequences from this podium. I will only say that we have made clear over time that we will respond when we see actions taken in terms of cyber attacks, cyber espionage, cyber intrusions. That has been a feature of our policy to date. It will remain a feature of our policy going forward. I'll take just a couple more and then let Karine take over. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jake. Can you give us a sense of what else President Biden said to President Trump about Russia in their meeting? And also, with regard to China, will he pass on any tips or color from his meeting with President Trump to President Xi when they meet? And what will his message be to President Xi?
I've already mildly violated the not reading out the meeting proviso, so I will pass that off to Karine. Mild violations. But with respect to his meeting with President Xi, I don't expect him to pass messages. Obviously, President Trump, when he comes into office, will have his opportunity to engage directly with President Xi. But I will observe that transitions are uniquely consequential moments in geopolitics. They're a time when competitors and adversaries can see possibly opportunity because you have this change in government here. And so part of what President Biden will communicate is that we need to maintain stability, clarity, predictability through this transition between the United States and China. And he will also really reinforce the point that in order for us to manage this competition responsibly going forward, we have to sustain over the long term the channels of communication at every level, particularly the military to military level. And then, of course, he will look to try to consolidate progress on areas where we can work together, for example, on counter-narcotics and fentanyl coordination, and on trying to manage the safety risks associated with artificial intelligence. So it's an important meeting. It will not be just a valedictory, although there will be an element of reflecting over the course of their long relationship. There is actual work to do in this critical moment between the U.S. and China to ensure that we don't run into any problems in the next 2 months in this transition of power. Last question.
Can you just sort of explain the strategy for the remaining drawdown authority for Ukraine, and also if the administration is going to ask for any additional drawdown authority in like an end-of-the-year CR or spending plan?
So the president has made clear, and he has directed his team to ensure that every dollar that the Congress gave to him, authorized him to spend, he will spend on behalf of Ukraine before he leaves office. Now, again, these are not dollars he's putting on an airplane and flying across the ocean. These are dollars he's investing in the American defense industrial base. As we provide weapons to Ukraine, we make new weapons to give to the U.S. military. All of those dollars will be spent, will be obligated by the time he leaves office on January 20th. Therefore, it only stands to reason that in the next 2 months, the administration will signal to Congress that we would like to see additional funds for Ukraine for 2025 so that they can be in the best possible position, the strongest possible position to negotiate, to ensure they achieve their objectives, that they win at the negotiating table. Now, what form will that take? CR, et cetera. I'm going to not get myself in trouble by turning into the OMB director up here. I will just say that the administration very much sees the necessity and the logic of seeking additional resources for 2025, since we are doing what Congress asked us to do, which is dispersing the funds they gave us for 2024. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Policy question?
Jake on the Amazon tree.
Thank you, Jake.
Congrats on becoming a congressional spouse.
I just have one more thing, and then I'll go into your questions. So today, the President and the First Lady welcomed nearly 200 education and workforce leaders to the White House for the Biden-Harris administration's Classroom Career Summit. The administration's Investing in America agenda is creating millions of good-paying jobs, many of which do not require a 4-year college degree, and its investments will continue